It looks like it's finally that time of year again. The snow is falling, the fireplaces are warming, everyone's leaving out cookies and milk for Santa Claus. That's right, everybody, it's April. If you think this video is late, wait till you see the next one. I started writing that one in January 2023. You might ask, what were you doing all this time? Well, I'll tell you. I got my driver's license. I actually watched more than one movie, which is not something I do often. I got back into reading. I started writing a book that will never come out. Don't ask me about it. I got into cooking. I'm making big personal development moves out here. Granted, I didn't get as much work done as I would have liked last year, but I'm gonna do my best to correct that this year. I also played some video games. Did you play video games in the year 2023? I played lots of video games. Well, actually, I haven't played the RE4 remake yet, but I'll get to it. I didn't play Pizza Tower either, or Alan Wake 2, or Talos Principle. Well, that came out in November. I'll get to it this year. No, still haven't. No. I never even finished Breath of the Wild. I'm so sorry. Did I play anything this year? Hey, there we go. I played that. All right, here's the angle for this video. Top 10 games of 2023. You won't believe where I ranked Balers Gate 3. Well, actually, you might believe it, considering. I played Animal Crossing New Leaf, but it didn't really grab me. So then I tried Animal Crossing New Horizons, and that didn't grab me either. I even tried Stardew Valley a long time ago, and that didn't click with me either. So after bouncing off 3 different games in this style, I kind of just figured this style of game probably just isn't my thing. And then I played the original Animal Crossing for the GameCube, and I actually liked it. I mean, I'm not checking on my town every single day, or even every week if I'm being perfectly honest with you, but I've actually put like 10 to 15 hours into this game, which is a lot more than I can say for every other game in this genre that I tried. I don't actually know what it is about it. Maybe the simplicity of everything? Maybe I just like the vibe more? It's homely and quaint, and I don't feel like I have to do anything. I think that's my primary issue with these games, is that everything they ask you to do just feels like chores. But this is the one that I've played where I don't actually feel obligated to do them. Maybe that says more about me than it does the game. Am I even recommending this game right now? I mean, me saying I think I like the vibes isn't really a solid endorsement. Maybe this isn't a recommendation for this game in particular, but it's a recommendation to try more games and genres you think you dislike. You might find something you like. Or you might waste your time and money. I don't know, I'm not your dad. Counter-Strike 2 is a complete remake of CSGO from the ground up. And by complete, I mean missing several maps and game modes, networking that needed adjusting on launch, and an economy that still needs rebalancing, completely neutered custom map and community server functionalities, and a new rating system that is confused. Fast forward 4 months later to our first big update, and there's lots of good things here, plenty of improvements. You know, arms race is back, that's great to see, but we're still playing catch-up with CSGO. I mean, for a little bit I was worried that CS2 might go the way of Artifact, or worse, Dota Underlords. And while I'm glad we're not on either of those paths, I'm still not thrilled with where the game's at yet, and I can't help but feel like the momentum of the fresh new release was basically wasted. There's still so much left to be done, and given this pace, it's gonna take at least another 6 months, if not longer, to get the game to where it should have been at launch. And yet, here it is on this list. Why do I do this to myself? Is it the crisp gunplay? The strategic battles? Do I really just like arguing with random people about nothing on the internet? Nah, I don't know. Let me get this ace. My ace! Have you ever played Ultra Kill and thought, yeah, this is pretty cool, but I wish it were slightly faster and fulfilled slightly more of my power fantasy? Well, allow me to introduce you to Severed Steel. It may not have the strongest style compared to today's heavy hitters in the boomer shooter field, and the story mode and writing is kinda, whatever. But boy howdy does this game let you zip around like a deflated balloon and click on enemies' heads, and I am a complete sucker for that. Does that make up for its other deficits? For me, mostly. The primary enjoyment for me here is in the game's roguelike mode. In the campaign, this level design felt a bit off given how fast you could zip through them, but they make a lot more sense when you just need to kill enemies and survive for a length of time. This is where the game can really push you to use every ability you have, and it just feels right. I think if the whole game had been built around this mode, it could have made the upper end of this list, but I can't complain with what I got. The studio's next game looks like it might be leaning a little more in that direction, and it'll have co-op too, so I'm excited to see how that turns out. When you see Cruelty Squad for the first time, the first thought that pops into your head is probably, why? Why is it the most hideous thing I've ever seen? Why does the UI look like alien spaceship controls? Why does the music sound like it was written by a 10-year-old trying to get signed to Warp Records? It's true, this game has a face only a mother could love. But deep down under all the layers of grotesque, fleshy muck and scum, Cruelty Squad has the heart of an early 2000s immersive sim? I'm sure the comparison has been made a billion times, but the gameplay really feels like the original Deus Ex on ice skates and PCP. It's a bizarrely familiar feeling to experience in a game that looks and sounds like nothing I've ever played before. Even the level design just makes sense, mostly. If you retextured and remodeled a lot of them, you could convince me that the layouts of most of these levels were pulled from a cut Deus Ex expansion or something like that. They're just covered in so much abrasive color and creepy smiling texture that they're hard to recognize. The writing is also pretty odd. If Deus Ex is a grand thesis on American dystopia, then Cruelty Squad is a fucked up Dadaist painting. Much like how the game doesn't expect you to enjoy its visuals and sounds, it also doesn't seem to care if you engage with its themes. There's no real conversations or arguments or anything like that. People just kind of say things at you. The mall level takes place in the Cancer City Mega Mall. Obviously, there's some commentary here on hyper-consumerism and so on. But after a while, I kind of just stopped thinking about it and focused on killing people, which I think is sort of the intended effect in an ironic way. It's clever in its own weird and perverse way. Apparently there's a few different endings, but by the time I got to the main one, I felt satisfied enough. I guess that's broadly how I'd categorize my experience with Cruelty Squad as a whole. It's very unique, and I did enjoy it for my 4-ish hour playthrough, and I'll probably revisit it down the line to see some of the things I've missed, but for now I'm just gonna appreciate all the games where I don't have to drag my mouse down to reload like it's a QuickTime event. I'm not usually one for horror games, they just don't really do much for me. But here's where Lethal Company got me. Proximity voice chat might be my favorite gimmick in all of gaming. You really only need two prerequisites for it to work: multiplayer and the ability for players to die very suddenly. If your game has these two things in it, proximity voice chat will probably make it better, and it works especially well in a game like this, where coordination is central to the gameplay loop. Another thing I really appreciate is the nice balance of whimsy this game has. If it was non-stop, scary, creepy shit like the entire time, it'd get pretty monotonous, but the format of the game really lends itself to funny stuff happening, as all co-op games tend to do, and it's nice to see the dev hasn't leaned away from that in favor of being super serious and scary like a lot of horror games. The real question is how much will this game have evolved in a year's time? The modding scene is pretty active, and I've quite liked the updates that I've seen so far, so I think there's a good chance that this game will be a good one to keep coming back to. Beyond that, I don't really have too much else to say. You know what Lethal Company is. You've probably watched all 15 parts of Markiplier playing it, you greasy content pigs. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say the phrase greasy content pigs. I was about 4 or 5 hours into Loop Hero when I was reading a conversation between the main character and an NPC, and I thought, is this game Eastern European? I don't know specifically what tipped me off, but a lot of writers from Russia and the ex-Soviet countries have this streak of existentialism in their work. A lot of people have said that Russian writing in general is depressing because Russian history is also depressing. And while I don't completely agree with that, it does often have a particular vibe to it. Like if you're ever watching a movie or playing a game and you notice that the characters are having a very direct and lengthy conversation about some abstract concept like morality or greed or ethics more broadly, there's at least a 50% chance it was written in this part of the world. So too is Loop Hero, a game about trying to rebuild a world that was consigned to darkness. I think the story they set for this game works quite well, actually, especially with the roguelike thing they've got going on with building the village back up. You might say it's ludonarratively consonant if you're a pretentious YouTuber with no money and no bitches and approximately 30,000 subscribers. You might say that if you're one of those people. I haven't played many of the other deck-building roguelikes out there, so I don't have much to compare to in terms of its depth or difficulty, but I think it strikes a nice balance of being approachable while still having plenty of little mechanics and strategies to find for yourself. Sometimes there's a bit of ambiguity with how exactly stats work, like what exactly is summon quality versus skeleton level? Does summon quality make the skeletons stronger and level upgrades them into the beefier ones, or is it the other way around? I don't know. I wish I could hover over the stat and get like a quick description of what exactly it means, or at least read about it somewhere other than the fan-made wiki, but that's small beans. Loop Hero is fun and addicting and stylish and well-written, and what more could you really ask for? Okay, I wish the soundtrack had a few more songs on it, and the game is like a smidge long, but that's basically it. Other than that, it's great. I've never been a particularly talented visual arts person. Like, I have semi-decent Photoshop skills, I can take a fine cat picture, but if you hand me like a pencil or a paintbrush, you're gonna get a result somewhere between squiggly stick figure and one half of a Rorschach. So when I saw footage of Such Art Genius Artist Simulator, I thought, fuck it, maybe I'll enjoy making a mess like a toddler for a little bit. This seems like a good game for that. But color me surprised, I actually had fun painting stuff. You get randomly generated prompts and requests from NPCs, but I don't think it's actually possible for them to reject your painting. So if somebody asks you for a painting of a cat, you can just spin bot with your paint minigun and send it off and get a nice thank you email. I do think it'd be neat if the responses actually had more specific feedback about your art, but I guess that might be a little difficult beyond things like recognizing colors or use of shapes maybe. There is a free DLC called Miserable Artist Experience where people will shit on you the entire time. I guess that'll have to do for that. The biggest strength of most weird little simulator games like this is letting the player loose. Let them go apeshit with whatever weird mechanics or physics you have at play. And being an artist with a cajillion little tools to play with is really the perfect setup for that. You know how art teachers in schools will say things like, the most important thing about art is having fun. That's basically the philosophy of this game. You can try to paint the Mona Lisa if you want, the tools probably allow for it, but they certainly weren't designed for it. Sometimes that can be a little frustrating when you're trying to get those little strokes of paint exactly where you want them, but give it enough time and you can develop a good feel for it. I don't know if this game is any more or less satisfying for actual artists who can actually draw and paint and all that. Given that you have to use the mouse for everything, you probably can't directly transfer a lot of that muscle memory, but I bet most of the knowledge on how to actually paint and draw is still applicable. I don't have any of that, so again, I couldn't tell you, but I was able to kind of make things, so if I can do that, that must mean that actually skilled artists can go crazy. In conclusion, such art? Much wow. We like to do topical humor here on the Brave Sirloin channel. Dredge is a... oh, hold on one second. Dredge is a fishing game, but it's not just any fishing game, it's a Lovecraftian fishing game. I'm not gonna lie, I probably spent the first 5 or 6 hours completely ignoring the core story and just fishing and upgrading my ship. Coming back to port with like a perfectly full ship holding that sell all key? Eventually I remembered, oh yeah, I guess I should talk to people and maybe actually do things, and wouldn't you know it, that's cool too. The mood of this game is pretty much perfect for what it's going for. The people are mysterious and kind of standoffish, the soundtrack is ominous but not too crazy, and the art and the environment work is fantastic. For what's apparently Black Salt's first game as a studio of 4 core staff, this is crazy polished. One particularly good game design choice this game makes is not using quest markers in your UI. You get little circles or dots on the map, but navigating there is up to you and your compass. It pushes you to get more familiar with the area and look for new nooks and crannies, but on the other hand, if you stay out too late at night, you risk going a little bit crazy. It's a clever balance that gives the core gameplay loop that structure that it needs. Dredge is a fundamentally simple game, but it has more than enough twists of flavor to keep it engaging. It's the kind of game that if it looks fun or interesting to you, odds are you'll probably like it. The Humble Powder Game. You know it, you love it. Now make it a roguelike, give it occult magic and some big fucking worms. Noita is the one game on this list that I haven't actually beat technically, but I have fought the final boss a few times. I have about 30 hours played, and the game doesn't really change that much between playthroughs with how strictly roguelike it is. At first I was concerned that so much randomness would wear on my patience, but after a while I started to kinda embrace the chaos. The Elemental Sandbox is basically an elaborate Rube Goldberg machine that starts the moment you spawn in and ends in your graphic and usually untimely death. Basically, it's like being a hamster. You know death is coming, and probably fast, but you'll never guess what flavor of fucked up it is. It makes perfect sense for the game, though. If you think about the appeal of the Powder Game, it was always about combining elements together and seeing what crazy stuff happened. Noita takes this about 100 steps further by placing you in the sandbox and forcing you to brave the elements for yourself. The wands, spells, and perks all have so many bizarre combos and unusual chemistries that it really is a skill just figuring out what to buy and why. Add on secret areas, secret bosses, secret rituals, and suddenly you have one of the most mysterious and deep roguelikes you'll ever see. And before I forget, holy shit, the soundtrack to this game. It might be one of the most unique soundtracks I've ever heard for a game. This insane blend of ambient music, drone, and doom metal, like jazz, funk. It really makes for a perfect accompaniment to eating fungus and drinking worm juice. I think once I have a little more time and a real iron grip on this game, it'll probably reach Certified Hood Classic status, but I'm not going to award it just yet. But still, you should buy this game. It goes on sale for like $10 pretty regularly, and it's worth it. What, I can just like put it down here? Then, oh, money! Oh. This feels like the start of some like myth where I learned a lesson about greed and I like completely cripple my foot by kicking a gold orb. Ah, Signalis, the premier anime robo-lesbian survival horror experience. So many ideas crammed into such a small space. Collective consciousness, metaphysics, transhumanism, classical art, classical music, classical fucked up fleshy zomboids. It's got everything, really. The gameplay is old Resident Evil meets old Silent Hill, and the presentation is high-concept anime meets brutalist retro-future PlayStation 1 Dead Space, also the color red. Somehow, all of these influences come together to make not only a cohesive experience, but a very impactful and beautiful one. Although sometimes the classical music kind of stood out to me in an awkward way. There's not a lot of it in the game. The vast majority of the game is scored by its own soundtrack, which is gritty and moody, and it's great. But once in a while, it pulls a classical piece out of its hat, and it's often the kind that you would hear on a now that's what I call classical music CD. You know, Moonlight Sonata, Swan Lake, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, although they did pick Summer, so I'll give them half a point for that. It's the kind of classical music that's so famous that even if you don't know the name of it or who wrote it, you've heard it before. Let me clarify though, the pieces that Signalis picks are not bad whatsoever, and they fit well enough to not be too distracting, but, you know, it can be kind of hard to separate music like this from the associations you have from hearing it in a million other places. There's a very serious and genuinely powerful scene where Chopin's Raindrop Prelude plays, and in the back of my head, all I could imagine was little diorama Master Chief holding his little plasma grenade, and then he looks up at the camera and there's like a little bit of like sunlight shining on his visor. Man, remember when Halo was cool? I miss that. Anyway, Signalis is a mindfuck in many ways, all of them right. It's surreal, it's confusing, I think it's non-linear maybe? The story is strong, its themes are well navigated, and while the gameplay formula of find a key to get an object, to unlock another key, to open a door, to find a key, to progress to the next area is a bit worn out, it's a very enjoyable descent into madness regardless. If we could just shift the whole horror genre this way instead of the direction of Amnesia clones, that would be great. Oh, okay, Meatman. Your number 2 pick is a remake of a sequel of a game from 2004. It's a PS2 game. What's the big whoop? I'll tell you what the big whoop is. It's Katamari. You take the ball, you roll up everything with it, and you listen to one of the best soundtracks in video game history while you do it. I didn't think I'd have to explain why that rules, but apparently I do, because not a lot of people have bought either of these remakes, and I know most of you never played them on the PS2 either, so let me hop on my soapbox for a second and proselytize here. Katamari is a rare kind of game. It's a game that inspires the most simple and primal kind of joy. You roll up a dog, you hear it bark. You roll up a car, you hear it honk. If you presented Katamari to a caveman, they would worship it. Not out of fear or reverence of the idea, but because just as the big rolly ball game is easily understood, the big rolly ball game understands you. It knows you want to roll everything up. It knows you want to wreak Godzilla-level havoc on the world. And not only does it know that, it encourages that. It presents the tearing up of continents with the jubilee of frolicking in a meadow. But most importantly, it's fun. It's a fun game. The gameplay is fun. The soundtrack is fun. The visual design is fun. If you expose yourself to this game for too long, you will be reduced to a smoldering pile of fun. But you'll have fun doing it. By the way, if any of the developers happen to see this, please bring back Odeko's giant forehead from the original. Thank you. You know, I've had my complaints about Call of Duty over the years, but as much as I hate to admit it, I have to say that Sledgehammer really delivered this year, and the Modern Warfare 3 reboot is not only one of the best COD games ever released, but also one of the best— Nah, I'm just fucking with you. Balers Gate 3. It's a Dungeons & Dragons video game, which means that it translates the tabletop D&D system into a video game. And as with any D&D game, the most important rule is rule number 1. There are rules. But you can kind of just change them if you want, it's no big deal, I'm not going to tell anybody. When you convert a pen and paper improv dice rolling game into a full-scale code and graphics video game, some adjustments are definitely in order. To disincentivize save scumming, they give you a few scrolls of Revivify for free. You can reclass to any other class at any time for a pretty small cost. That's not in the rulebook. Technically, it's not even a rule that rolling a 20 is an automatic success on a skill check. But you know what is in the rulebook? The D&D rules help you and the other players have a good time, but the rules aren't in charge. Speaking of rules, I have no idea how intuitive or useful the tutorials and tooltips are in this game. I've played like a decent amount of Tabletop 5th Edition, so I already know things like what an armor class is and how some spells have a save DC and some have attack rolls, stuff like that. It's funny, I was actually slightly confused at first when I saw my attack chances as a percentage, because even though that's totally normal for a turn-based strategy game, you don't get percentages like that in tabletop D&D unless you pull out a calculator and do the math. The only other video game adaptation of D&D I've touched is the Neverwinter MMO about 8 years ago. So while I can't really speak to how this compares to the classics yet, I gotta say, boy, this D&D game really feels like D&D. Everything from the plot to the character writing, it all feels like it's ripped straight from a tabletop campaign. And what I mean by that is it feels organic. Your characters have a progressive growth to them, and the decisions that they and you make shape them into who they'll be by the end of the game. Does it have the best fantasy writing you'll ever see in a game? I don't know. Like, not really. It's kind of hokey sometimes, to be honest, but it doesn't have to be the best line for line. Maybe the most important thing in any role-playing game is that it gets you invested in the characters, and by and large, that's the strongest aspect of both tabletop D&D and Balers Gate. Hearing your party members talk, even about like the most mundane things, is just enjoyable. I'm pretty much always interested in hearing what they have to say. Except Will. Will is lame. And not lame in an endearing way like Gale. Sometimes it feels like all AAA or quadruple A game companies do nowadays is try to siphon as much of your attention as possible with the least amount of effort. Bigger maps, more NPCs, more quests, more content. Whoever has the game with the most content will have the biggest share of the gaming pie. And so big budget game development has essentially become an engagement arms race. It's led to some of the most creatively and morally bankrupt games I've ever seen, and it doesn't look to be slowing down anytime soon, but in this desert of quality AAA games, Balers Gate 3 is an oasis. The game is huge. It's an 80-hour campaign, but it's not 80 hours of collectibles, it's not 80 hours of fetch quests or resource gathering or battle pass leveling. It's 80 hours of role-playing and turn-based combat, getting to know characters, and going on an adventure. And who doesn't like a good adventure?